Welcome back, everyone. Our next panel discussion is on digital leadership, a mass transformation. To successfully steer an organization through disruptive times, organizations have always needed leaders who are comfortable with the disrupting world and who can effectively manage disruption. So, how do these organizations cultivate a new breed of digital leadership in the fast changing digital world? To chair this session, we have with us Prashant Bhatnagar, Director, HR Credit Suisse. Prashant is an HR leader with cross-cultural experience in building and leading high-performing teams across North America, APAC, and India. And in his current role, he's responsible for attracting and enabling talent to help realize business strategy. I would request Prashant to introduce the panelists. Thank you so much. We look forward to a great and very engaging session. Over to you, Prashant.
Thank you, Ruby. Good afternoon, good evening, and perhaps even good morning to some of you who are dialing in from different parts of the world. I'm really excited to be chairing this. The conversation really is a continuation of the discussions we've been having over the last day or so on how digital and technology is enabling the shifts in the workplace and expectations from leaders. This conversation is specifically focused on digital leadership and what that entails, and I have a panel with me who will spend some time over the next hour or so talking from their experiences, taking some of your questions and answering some of that. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce to you the fellow panelists, Bhawna Agarwal, who's CEO of NDTV Gadgets. Bhawna is an award-winning digital leader, an entrepreneur with 17 plus years of experience, having run this across various companies, internet companies and startups. She currently runs as CEO of NDTV's e-commerce venture Gadgets 360. So welcome, Bhawna. Excited to have you as part of the panel. I'd like also to introduce Sanjeev Prasad, the global CIO for Sutherlands. Sanjeev brings over 25 years of global experience in leading digital transformation of large complex organizations as a CIO. As Sutherlands CIO, he's leading the technology functions and businesses. Sanjeev, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And Ketan Kapoor, co-founder and CEO of Mettl. Ketan has worked with many organizations, including Isango, IndiePay, Networks, and American Express. And his expertise lies in helping companies build winning teams through scientific people interventions. Ketan, thank you for making time and joining us today.
Thank you, Prashant.
Lovely. So as a format, what we will do is we will invite each of the panelists to share their views on the topic for about 2 to 3 minutes. And post that, I have some questions for them as part of the discussion that I will post to them. We welcome the audience to share their questions along the way. If you see there is a Q&A button, you can use that to share some of your questions. We'll try and take some of those questions as we are in the middle of these discussions, and then we certainly have some time planned towards the end of it as well. Before we begin, I thought I'll just share some context or some quotes that I read, which really stayed with me as we were preparing for this conversation. Somebody recently commented, which stayed with me, is technology is like air. It's necessary for survival. It is invisible, but one pays attention only when the quality goes down. And for many of us living in perhaps Delhi, this may not be more appropriate than that. We talk about it only because we perhaps may have to wear masks sometimes to breathe in the city of Delhi. Hopefully a problem that we'll be able to put in the past. I also read somewhere, which was also interesting, that millennials is perhaps the last generation that will witness the transition from analog to digital, which essentially means we are seeing the transition, and many of us are seeing the transition, but perhaps that may be the last generation witnessing it, and the new generation will only live in the digital world. So when we talk about technology impact and the impact of that on the work and the workforce, what are organizations doing? What challenges are they grappling with? What are leaders doing? And in that conversation, I invite Bhawna, Sanjeev, and Ketan to share some of their experiences and what they have seen work. So I'm going to invite Bhawna to share some of her experiences for the next 2-3 minutes, followed by Sanjeev and Ketan, and then we'll begin some of the questions. Bhawna, over to you.
Sure. Hi, everybody. So, Prashant put it very nicely, and I would definitely like to say that this is clearly an age of disruption. We're living in a period of transformative change where the fastest to respond may become the fastest to succeed. And a lot of times people do talk about disruption as, it's a new word, but I don't think it's only about thinking of new creative ideas all the time. It's about reinventing the way you work, reinventing the way we believe about our teams, about our own self, about our own biases. So I think clearly digital is becoming the new normal. In my lifetime till now, I've already seen the evolution of, paper ticket to mobile ticket now, or, watching movies on DVD to streaming it online, and reporting of news from cameras to mobile. So I think the new technologies of mobile and digital media have clearly revolutionized the entire media, as technology has completely changed the way even journalism, is happening these days. And also, very important thing that I've realized is that we just can't take the future for granted, because it's very difficult to determine what is around the next bend in the road. And that's the reason it makes the job of the leadership even more critical, because this is the time for the leadership to decide, for the CEOs to decide if the company is going to survive and flourish, or perhaps become the next Kodak. So I think, you must be able to do whatever to evolve and exist against any certain set of circumstances, whatever is happening around us. And I've clearly seen this very recently in media, where, until some time ago, developing and delivering content used to be at the core of what media companies used to do. But, as and when the technologies are emerging, it has completely changed. In fact, we clearly see several leaders across many sectors are embracing digital technologies and using it to drive tremendous growth in the businesses. So, I think it's definitely very relevant, and I would be very happy to have, a very deeper level conversation around that with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhawna. I really liked some of the things and comments you made about what's the next bend on the road. I think clearly many of us are seeking that direction, or seeking that visibility, which may not be there for us. Sanjeev, next I invite you to share some of your views, and perhaps adding to what Bhawna said, or some views of your own experiences before we dive into the next part of it.
Yeah, so some very common theme about what Bhawna mentioned. And so let me start by saying just the same thing, but I would just like to give some different examples from the industry I come from. I've been in the tech world now for more than 25 years. Now it's close to 30 years. Right from the Valley, where I started my career, to starting my own tech company in the 90s, to being part of a BPO organization as a global CIO, and now with another one, which are all going through massive transformation, right? So this journey has actually been very exciting. I feel I'm very fortunate to have lived through this digital transformation time. And I would call all the transformation since the last 30 years digital transformation. As Bhawna mentioned, transformation is going on, right? The only thing what is happening now is the speed of change is extremely rapid, right? If you go back, and everyone here has heard the example, right? The Industrial Revolution, right? When all the industrial machines came in, from agriculture to the industrial society, that was still a gradual change. That still disrupted lives. That still had impact on lives, right? But people had time to adjust somewhat. If you look at the change which has happened since 1990, I've been in technology since '85. Since 1990, you see the speed of change is immense. The impact it's having on lives is massive. On jobs, it's huge, right? So we are all experiencing that. The change is impacting not only organizations, right, like ours, the ones we operate in. I'll give you some examples from there, but it's impacting functions within the organization, jobs within the organizations. And this, you can see a clear-cut impact on what is happening. In fact, being part of the BPO industry, which has created so many jobs across India, I think we need to understand that a lot of the jobs which you're doing today will go away because of digital transformation, right? A lot of the low-end jobs, for example, you do accounts payable today, right? You can actually integrate 2 ERPs between the supplier and the customer and just have it online go through. It's already happening, right? You do help desk ticket today, right? You all guys have IT. I heard about IT problem. Who do you call? The CIO, right? I've been living that life as well. But if you think about it, you can actually automate it. You can make it self-help. What happens to all these guys who are actually doing that job today, massive number of people. They're going to go through massive, I would say, disruptions in their lives, right? I mean, the business we know about Kodak, we know what's going to happen to the transport industry with what Uber is doing, the taxi guys. I mean, you name it, you will find n number of examples. But imagine what's going to happen to these folks. And the challenge you have is that some of them are not necessarily trainable, because the jobs which will get created because of AI, machine learning, and the new analytic jobs, they're going to require far greater, higher level of education, critical thinking, analytical ability, which is not going to be that easy to find, right, or develop necessarily in a very short period of time. There will be people who will ride the wave, who will succeed immensely, and you're seeing that wealth disparity actually happen. So now what does it mean for the organization? What does one do, right? And I think a lot of us are grappling with that. I think, if you see the changes, how do you make sure that people participate in this digital journey, right? And I will give you some examples. We ran an internal hackathon, for example, where we got the process guys who never worked in technology and technology guys together to enable that, right? How do you make sure that your leaders are actually helping people transform? Or guess what? For the survival of your organization, are they getting the right people in to actually transform? So I would say the theme is lead the change. I think the biggest thing is lead the change. You cannot be follower in today's world, I believe, because if you do, 90% of the time you're going to be left behind, right? And the other part I would just mention is that this is no longer a top-down approach, right? You cannot have me, the CIO, knows everything, and I'm going to tell you what to do. The best of ideas are actually coming from people who are actually working on the floor, working in different functions. And actually, if you don't harness that, you don't create an organization of collaboration, you don't create an organization of innovation, equality, right? You've heard all these stories which are emanating in today's world, what's going on in America today, and you see how the tech companies are actually putting forth a different viewpoint on how the culture should exist. And so I would just say that it's about culture. Finally, it's really about culture in these organizations. If you see what somebody like Satya Nadella drives, every meeting he starts with a discussion on culture and he ends with a discussion on culture. And I think if you don't do that, because this change is very difficult to bring about otherwise. So the leaders have to lead with the cultural change and obviously make sure that everybody has a chance to participate in. Thanks.
Thanks, Sanjeev. I think very pertinent point, especially around the time one has to adapt to the change which is in front of us. Not that changes didn't happen before, but we perhaps don't have the luxury of time as we did before, among other things. Thank you. Ketan, I'd like to invite you and hear your views on the topic. You've heard Bhawna and Sanjeev before you. What would you like to add or have a different point of view to what they are sharing?
So obviously largely agree with what Bhawna and Sanjeev shared. Just a bit of context, I'm less than 40 years old. I run a company with 400 people in the company, and I'm one of the oldest people in the company. So a very young population, which means that in many ways, I'm already significantly behind in my awareness levels of some of the digital tools that some of the younger guys use, some of the productivity tools that some of these guys use. So, and I consider myself as a very tech savvy guy, so to say. But when I speak to some of these youngsters, average age is around 25, 26 in our company, they are probably already 5 years ahead of me in terms of their adoption of the newer technologies. I think what has changed in our lifetimes from no TV to single TV channels to our screen time being more than 10 hours to 12 hours every day, be it a computer or a laptop, getting more than probably 300 emails every day, doing at least 4 to 10 meetings, either remotely or in person, but again, taking notes on a computer or phone increasingly. So we're living a life, and this is across sectors, across industries, and increasingly across seniority levels as well. It is all digital. I mean, at least I stopped taking notes in a pen and paper a long time back. I kind of try to take digital notes as far as possible. In a way, everything, there's a tool that I use called Evernote, which just has everything of my information online. So as a customer of digital technology, I have changed my behaviors a lot. And I would say that a lot of us are in the same boat. A lot of the audience here are in the same boat. So there are, if I want to give a framework to this, there are two aspects. One is at a personal level, at a leader level, what are the changes that one is being witness to, one is adopting to, and what the learning agility of one to adopt to these changes. And as Sanjeev mentioned, it is very, very rapid and very, very fast. The second is at an organization level. What are the kind of changes an organization starts to witness when you move some of the processes that were being done, let's say, in analog or conventional level to in a digital level? And the communication, maybe the meetings are more remote as opposed to in person. So what are the changes that are manifested at an organization level? Probably if you can deep dive into these two aspects, that will be great. I recently read a book which said that there is a huge counter-intuitive trap, which is like the tech trap, so to say, that the more you use technology in everything and anything that you're doing, the more you tend to, the lesser you use your brain, which maybe you don't know the effects. Nobody has done enough and more studies to kind of long-term effects of that. But that is something maybe towards the end, if you can touch upon that as well, that will be interesting. But as a kind of CEO of a young tech startup, I would say that I'm already behind. I don't use Instagram yet. I've never used Snapchat. I've never used some of the latest tools. I've never used some of the productivity tools that are there. So I'm already behind, even though I think that I'm fairly tech savvy, which is a great challenge. If you look at it, it's a great challenge for me personally as a leader.
Thanks, Ketan. Bhawna, that comment about Ketan being less than 40 was only for Sanjeev and me. So please don't take it to heart. This was just about the fact, and I think it's a good reference point, because despite being less than 40, Ketan still is the oldest, perhaps, individual in his organization, which goes to say that many of the challenges that some of the people in this team may be experiencing is not something Ketan has first-hand experience of, and therefore, as leaders, how do we solve for problems we may not have experiences, and our own emotional distance and psychological distance from that may be higher. So thank you for that. I see already some questions coming in, so we'll get a few more and then we'll start raising there. So just in the context of that, clearly technology's had a big impact on the workplace, on work, on us individuals, specifically on the aspects of leadership, because this conversation is more centered around that. I'd like to kind of have some follow-up questions to the panelists, and maybe begin by asking Bhawna this question. Bhawna, what do you think the new expectations from leaders are given the technology landscape today? What are things that either you believe are expected of you or you expect from your leaders, given what's happening in the world of technology around us, and how is that different from what it was perhaps in the past?
So I think, Prashant, sometimes, in fact, I feel, and I keep talking about it in the office also, that, we are literally on a treadmill of innovation. And, you're on this treadmill and it's nonstop. And you have no choice but to keep adapting, innovating, learning, and the treadmill will continue to get faster. So I think earlier the leadership was all about protecting the status quo. Now it's all about challenging the status quo, right? So I think this is, and of course the employees, our clients, everybody, whether the board members or the teams, they have tremendous expectations, not only because of the evolution, but also about the ecosystem that's evolving. And I keep talking about it that, when the ecosystem outside is changing more rapidly than the people inside, then it's a very dangerous situation to be in. And that's the reason the leadership also has to evolve. And that personally, for me also, I've always believed, especially now, that leadership is no longer about direct power, but about influence. So I think it's also about trusting the team to give them more flexibility, especially in this environment, because, you can manage multiple offices. Imagine the way we are right now. We are on a virtual conference. We just don't need to be physically present at one place to be able to conduct this. Similarly, we need to start trusting our people to manage their projects anywhere, anytime, because they also know that, they will be evaluated. They know that, we have these stats available of what is really happening. So technology it's more about embracing the change than resisting the change. I mean, there were time when earlier, no important decisions could be taken because the CEO was traveling, right? Or unreachable. I mean, these days, literally, it has made, tech has made it possible for you to be connected anytime, right? And and at the same time, in fact, I also like some of the earlier points that you talked about. It's no longer about communicating a message. It's about engaging, with your team. It's also about engaging with your consumers and with your partners. It's no longer about, hey, this is the message and this is what you've got to do. It's also about collaboration. It's also about managing the opportunities rather than just managing the risk.
Thanks, Bhawna. I really like the way you spoke about protecting versus challenging status quo. I think that's clearly a big theme for many of us today. Ketan, from your experience, what do you think has changed or new expectations that people have of you as a leader, which perhaps wasn't the case previously?
So I think one is that every meeting that you go to, you would be expected to be the master of that topic, which means if I'm entering into a digital marketing meeting, as a CEO, you will be expected to know much more than others. So that's the expectation. But you may be a total zero. I mean, you may not have, you may say D of digital marketing, and within digital marketing, there's like SEO, there's AdWords, there's search engine marketing, social marketing, and you may not be an expert there as well. So I think there is a huge demand at a personal level to be on top of some of those things, at least because whenever you speak something, whenever you kind of impart something, it's taken with a certain weight, and unless it is backed by some credible insight, it may just be irrelevant for the people because they may be younger than you, or they may look up to you to kind of give them some guidance in an area that you are scarcely aware of. So that at a personal level, I would feel that leadership in a very digital world would be, it's like you're leading your Indian cricket team coach and you don't know anything about bowling. So, I mean, the kind of respect that coach will get from the bowlers when they are interacting with the bowlers, that you should bowl this way or that way, it's a similar situation. So, so thankfully, Ravi Shastri is the right person right now. But think of that scenario, and that is a scenario that you encounter daily in meetings after meetings. The digital marketing may be one thing, customer support might be others. Maybe opening an office in China might be the third challenge. And these are very, very diverse challenges that you might have to be on top of before you enter the meeting. So the personal demands become very, very high. And this will increasingly become higher and higher as the world becomes more complex, as there are new information bombardment that happens. So your ability to absorb some of these demands, especially in a fast-growing business, if you're growing 100% year on year, there are on a daily basis. We are in our 8th year today, for example, and I don't think no second day is the same as the first day. I mean, every day there is a new challenge that you're expected to solve, let alone understand.
Thank you. Yeah, it is kind of almost trying to be a subject matter expert in an area where the subject itself is perhaps 2 weeks old. For most of the people, it is absolutely a daunting challenge. Sanjeev, just a related question, but on the flip side of it, from your experience, since you spoke about you've been in the industry for many, many years, what leadership practices in particular are you seeing that are being phased out or already dead today, given what's happening, especially given the evolution of technology?
So, I think Bhawna mentioned it along the way, right? And I think I also touched upon it in my opening comments, that one thing I truly believe, that the directive style of operations is really not the way to operate anymore. The reasons are obvious, and I think Ketan touched on it. I know the CEO is expected to understand a lot. I know in fact, I'll make that statement very clearly. Every job today is a technology job. It doesn't matter what you do, and it doesn't mean you know how to code, right? It means that you have an understanding of various pieces of technology, how to bring it in, how to work with the technology providers of making sure that happens, right? So that's extremely important. But what it also means is that you won't know everything. And I've been in this to 35 or maybe 30 plus years in this technology industry. And humility and humbleness has been such a core to that. If you go to the valley, yes, there's a lot of arrogance around, but at one level, there's a lot of humility. People are willing to learn from each other. People, new ideas come from various different sources. And if you don't embrace that, you will be missing out on opportunities. So a directive style, I truly believe, is something which I'm not saying has gone away, but any true leader would understand that in today's world, to transform a company, right, and to be continuously changing, it's a volatile world, right? It's changing every day. You need that leadership skill, which allows people to come up with ideas. Those ideas are embraced so that they become then part of the entire ecosystem, and it helps the company grow, change, innovate, or whatever that may be. I think the other thing which is becoming now, I think it's very much needed today, I'm hoping it'll continue, is the way we look at people, look at performance, right? And I'm now getting something very specific now. Individual performance, obviously is important, right? I mean, we all have to contribute a piece, but today's objectives are not achieved by individual performance alone. It was never the case actually, but it's become even more important today. It is all about collaboration. It is all about, team effort to getting to a certain point, because to achieve the objectives we want, if in everything which you do, you have to have a process understanding, you need to have technology understanding, you need to have the customer point of view. To make that really happen, right, you need people to work together. If your performance systems are geared towards individual performance, it is not going to lead to success. It is not going to drive the right objectives, right, or the performance which you expect from the company. So I think these are things which are, I don't think any of this has fully happened. I think some of the smarter companies are changing, are adopting. They're mostly a learning organization, but the others are still having a tough time. And in fact, they need somebody to hold their hands, to actually take them on this journey. This change transformation is such an important piece that I think some of these guys truly do need help. So this is, I mean, it's a continuous journey. That's the way I'll put it.
Thanks, Sanjeev. Really like the way you said it. Every job is a technology job. So absolutely, I think it's very difficult to separate what aspect of our job doesn't involve technology and what does. So the fact that we are on conference calls throughout the day is a great and living example of that, among other things, including the fact that we're doing this virtually using technology. I see some set of questions have started coming in already. So I'm going to start taking a few questions along the way. The first question is from somebody who says, I'm 28 years old, heading a team of 40 people. Please let me know 3 lessons from your experience that should be my golden rules. Anybody would like to take a stab at it from your experience?
Ketan, you are the 40-year-old. Maybe you should.
So I think it was touched by Sanjeev. So humility, I mean, you may be a master of 1 or 2 or 3 things, but you may not know a million other things. So humility and humility stems from that. A lot of it that you know today may be just chance. So that is the first golden rule. I think persistence of your goal and sticking to the core competence that you would have. I mean, increasingly one has to define their own area of play or area of turf and has to be the best in the world in that area of play. So just being very, very persistent and going deeper and deeper into that niche that you have, this person has for himself or herself, I think is needed. And obviously doing anything, not just for the sake of it, but because you like to do it. There's a concept of ikigai, which is what you do, what you love, what are you good at, what the world will pay you for, and what the world needs today. And if you can find that intersection of all these 4 things and do it, passion will automatically come. So the third thing is just doing whatever you're doing with passion. See, humility, persistence, and passion.
Thank you. Bhawna, any 4th golden rule from your experience to add to this list?
Sorry, I think Ketan has already covered, most important points. And of course, now that we're talking about technology and disruption, agility, I think, is very important. It's also about, being agile. Anything that you do, with regards to your own growth, it is very important to keep learning and be agile, and absolutely, not worry about, hey, what will happen if I were to do this? I think you would rather worry about what won't happen if I don't do it. So I think, being agile is also very important.
Thank you. So one more question. This is actually directed to Sanjeev. Sanjeev, the question is, the speed of change is rapid, but it's not really moving so fast on its own. What and who is the accelerator of this super bullet speed change? And can we not control it to suit the learning abilities of those who are likely to be affected?
I wish we had a brake, right? Or an accelerator, which we could actually take our pedal off and say, let's slow down a little bit. Unfortunately not. I think, the way technology is evolving, those tech czars, these smart guys like Ketan and his team, a lot of other startups, and I was, in that shoe with myself, I would say 15, 20 years ago. People are innovating all the time. Innovations are being adopted all the time. It's like saying, hey, Silicon Valley, can you stop innovating, right? Or slow down your innovation. If the innovation comes out, somebody's going to use it. If somebody's going to use it, they're going to get better at it than you. They're going to have a competitive advantage over you. So there is I don't think there's really any way of slowing down this engine, right? With the way communication exists today, that anything gets created in the Valley today or in India today, it's spread across the world instantaneously. I know, and so the speed of change again becomes rapid because of that. There is no really way of slowing it down. I'll tell you this, when I started on my journey, I started my company in 93, 94, I know I was one of the leaders in this new technology called client server. And you know why I had an advantage? Because I'd worked it around the Valley, and it took 2.5, 3 years before anybody else could figure it out. So when I came back and I could actually launch my company with this new technology, and I had a 2-year advantage on it, right? So you could say that, because of the time lag in people learning, you could slow down the pace of change, but that's all gone, right? I think if you go to China today, look at the China internet. Probably China is the most digital world country as it stands, right? From anything you want, it's all available online. People live on the internet today, right? Buying anything and everything, all kinds of services. If China is in that mode, sooner or later, every country has to say, why aren't we in that same mode? Because there's going to be huge competitive advantage which is going to come out of that. So it's like a what's the word for it? It's self-perpetuating. I really don't think you can stop it. The only way is that if you stop the innovation engine, which I don't think is happening. So I don't know if that answers the question, but really that's what it is.
No, it does. The reality is that you don't control who gets to innovate.
Yes.
We just get to perhaps embrace it, and if we're lucky, some of us get to contribute towards that innovation because that's happening in spite of us or despite of us. That is just the reality that we have to live in. Thank you. One more question. Bhavna, there's a question for you about, you spoke about challenging status quo. How do we ensure this happens consistently at all levels in the organization? What are some of your experiences that has worked for you in the past?
Sorry, let me just unmute. So I think there have been a lot of times, Prashant, that bringing change is very important. A lot of times, you are able, if you're lucky, you're able to get good people who clearly have the ability to drive change and understand that it is very important to really be very agile and drive changes at a very, very fast next pace. But then there are times you have people, sometimes you adopt people when you join a new organization where there are two ways in which you can deal with it. Either you say, sorry, you're not needed, which is the unfortunate way, or sometimes you really take the harder route where you say that, okay, let me collaborate, let me really walk the talk, right? And do it the hard way by reorienting them, by aligning their own goals with the goals of the organization. It is easier said than done, but this is the difficult route. Because it's very important to identify people who have the flexibility to handle change and committed to find ways to excel under different circumstances. And it's equally important for us at the leadership team to drive that kind of a culture into the DNA, because then others ideally should be able to follow willingly and not just because they're being told so. Because if there's a lot of participation, if there is, the culture is that creativity is celebrated, even failure is celebrated. And I think that becomes more important And it's not about, having a fear of failure. If somebody fails, somebody has made a mistake, that means, somebody has at least tried. As long as that person learns from the mistakes and moves on and say, hey, I've got to do it better. So I think it's a combination of a lot of these things.
Got it. Thank you. I like the way you talk about just being committed to finding a way. And I think that's where perhaps half the battle is, because many of us give up at the first hurdle or the first resistance, and thinking that it is perhaps not destined in this organization, this time, this place, but few of us have the tenacity to see it through. And I think that ends up being the differentiator for many of the people that we look at. All right. Lovely. We've got a lot of questions coming in, so I'm going to try and look at some of these questions and see how we move from it. So there is a question, how are organizations using technology to test and train employees' agility and adoption skills? Ketan, perhaps an appropriate question for you, given the space you are in.
Yeah. So yeah, we are an assessments company. So there is, in fact, Sanjeev also touched upon it earlier on, that there's some talk around redundancy of skills 5, 10, 15 years down the line. So in fact, a lot of progressive organizations are kind of taking the lead, understanding, let's say, what 20% of the skills or job profiles might get redundant. What are the profiles of people in those types of skills that are there? What are the interest levels of those people to go into if they want to get an option to do one more thing or one more different job, what will that be? Then understanding the learning agility of those guys of taking up a new skill. And on top of that, if you put in something which is called proximity of skills, which is like, if you know skill X, your probability or propensity to learn skill X prime is higher than let's say skill Y. So understanding that proximity skill map, that if you know X, you have an inclination to do, let's say, something. X prime is a skill that you can easily take up, and you have the learning agility to take that up very quickly, and then setting up a training program. Instead of the status quo, which is like, okay, what do you want to do apart from this? Which is just very top level interest based analysis. So at scale, some of the companies that we are working with are going very, very deep in not just interest, but also the learning agility of individuals. Also, where are they in a certain skill set? Understanding the proximity map of skills. Where are they in the new set of skills that they want to take off? And then deciding a training map or improvement map thereupon. So and this is things just getting started. There is a lot to be done here. There's very little work globally that has happened there, in fact. So those are some of the things that we are working on. And I think just associated point is people policies in organizations actually will transform the most. So see, the basic principles will remain the same. You will still need to sell something to grow your revenues. You'll still need to build a product or a service that you will sell. But how you will do it, the pace of it, the manner of it will probably change because of technology. But one thing that will change most rapidly is the kind of people policies that you will have, what kind of empowerment that you give to those people, what kind of people do you hire in your system so that they are agile from day one, as Bhawna mentioned. And how do you measure agility in the first place? I mean, these are things which, very little research has happened. If I want to measure agility in someone, what should I do? What kind of question should I ask? And what is the validity of that question or relevance of that question? These are things that we are working on actually as we speak.
Great. I think it's one of those things where you see after the fact as opposed to before the fact. It's easy to comment the presence of it, but the absence of it is sometimes difficult to quantify and assess. So those are some of the challenges that we deal with. A related question, which I was also looking at asking, we're talking about a lot of technology and how technology is shifting it. There's a question from Shalini and something that I was asking as well. There are a group of 220 women partners in remote areas in the age group of 30 to 40 for an apparel brand manufacturing. They can't use tech, but really are excellent at what they are doing. So are they lagging behind despite being good in business? Why force innovate? And really the theme is, for those who are not conversant with technology, and maybe don't need technology as much as they think today, how are we enabling those to be on this journey?
Can I take that?
Yeah, you can take that, Ketan, and then I can get Sanjeev's comments as well. Yeah,
so I think essentially there is a lot of, I think people generally want a big bang approach. There is a lot of merit in incremental improvement in knowledge. So if somebody says I'm not conversant with technology, so that 0 to 1 won't happen in a day. So probably every week or every month, if there is a small step taken towards, let's say, becoming more technology literate or more technology oriented, that can definitely help this gentleman that who has asked this question, or this lady that has asked this question. So I think small steps towards endorsing and embracing technology would help a lot. And I think this is something that will gather pace on its own, because once I endorse something which is good for me, my interest in that thing automatically increases because it benefits me. So I think this group of women, if they kind of start taking baby steps and they see and feel the difference in the business in their day-to-day lives, they'll automatically show more interest towards it.
Thanks, Ketan. Sanjeev? Sanjeev, sorry.
Yeah, it's a little different point of view. The whole, if you see what's happening today, right? Every rickshawala, every driver, anybody in the villages you travel to, most people are using technology in some form or the other, right? It's not about, obviously complex systems and all are a different matter. And we're not even talking about them. I think you can achieve enough with what's available today in the smartphone and the mobile devices which people carry. And I won't be surprised that these women whom we're talking about at least have some access to it. If they don't have it, I mean, that's step one. Let's put it this way. But most people have, right? They have access to information. If they are doing whatever, I mean, the farmers, right? They have access to weather information. They have access to what's happening in the mandis, this example, right? So they have access to, they have the ability to use technology for their own business purposes. I think making technology available, simplified usage for them is the right way of doing it. I don't think this is, and I mean, that's my view. I mean, I think, obviously this is it's a learning issue, right? And I know Ketan is thick, right in the middle of this. But I personally believe that making technology available in such a way that everybody can use it very easily is core to it. And I think that's what, all the Apples, the Samsungs, and all these companies of the world, or even app companies today, that's what they're trying to do, because that's how you meet the objectives of these, the folks who are trying to use it. And they're trying to make it, simplifying it enough so that anybody should be able to use that. And that has been the intent. If you see, I mean, single button on a, on an iPhone, right? And if you go and look at the first PC, when it came out, by the way, first time I started working on it in 83, 85, right? Actually assembled with my own hand, right? In the university when I was in the US. And I know when you start using it, I mean, you had to really learn the stuff. I mean, who knew DOS, right? DOS, I mean, you had to learn all the commands, or Unix, all the commands. I'm just sharing that with you. So I believe that, if technology should be like your hands and arms are today, like writing is. It needs to become an appendage to you, right? And it may not be fully there yet, but I think that's where it needs to get to, so these women can actually adopt and use it. And I think that's what we need to do, because the digital divide is huge. And if people can't participate in it, can't use technology to their own benefit, that's something which we just cannot, as a world, we cannot afford. So obviously learning, education, all part of it. But I think the devices itself have to become, the applications itself have to become such that anybody should be able to use it. That's my view. And I think it's already going there. That's my.
Just to add, Prashant, I think what she has mentioned is they're already good at their job. So why force innovate? So there's no, I mean, if somebody's doing a job perfectly, no need to innovate. But a simple thing is, let's say maybe a YouTube video might teach them to stitch a button better, or on a different style, or maybe a collar of a different style. Or maybe there might be 100 features in the sewing machines that they're using, and they may only use 10 today. Maybe the 11th feature might help them save 5 minutes, which is a direct kind of link to their income, because they get paid by every shirt that they make or every apparel that they make. They may be good at the job today, but there's always room to improve, and it can help them in their daily livelihoods. So why not force innovate?
Yeah, in fact, I would like to share one recent example. I was, speaking at an event, and I, of course, and that was an eye opener for me when I saw a lady from a rural village of Maharashtra who had come over, to the dais, and she spoke about her experience of, understanding digital. And suddenly, we were all jolted because, we all take technology for granted, thinking that, hey, it's given, right? We all understand this better. But how she was able to leverage technology to drive her business, in a remote village with very, very limited access to internet, to smartphones, and to technology was an eye opener. I mean, she was somebody who did not even have proper access to internet and to a mobile phone. And she started to support her family. She started selling bee honey, right? And, before the understanding of internet, and she shared that, there were some people from Google, who came to her village and just tried to empower women and just tried to help them understand that how they could use YouTube, as Ketan talked about, to understand videos, right? And seek knowledge from videos in terms of how to do the business better, how to do day-to-day things better. And then she was able to share that, I started learning how to see a video on YouTube, and she started understanding that even bees get sick, and, how to increase productivity in terms of, being able to generate more honey. And from a point where, she was selling just 4 kgs of honey in a month, she started selling 200 kgs of honey in a month. That was the journey by, and how she was able to just use YouTube to be able to sell better. And suddenly that was an eye opener that, wow, I mean, with so much of limited access, she was able to understand that if I were to embrace this new medium, it will help me conduct my business better. So it's not about innovating, as Ketan talked about. It's also about using what you have, and leveraging that strength to be able to do it better.
Yeah, thank you, Bhawna. Very, very good example. I'm sure we have all examples of how YouTube has helped us live our lives better. I can speak for first-hand experience now that we have to wear formal ties at my workplace more often than not. Just knowing how the different types of knots available in a tie, there's no better resource than YouTube to do that as well. So a couple of interesting questions. One from Shubh about technology taking away jobs. Isn't that a long way away? And since all organizations are not securely moving towards that journey, how many of these are doing it? Is it just kind of something that will happen? And then a completely different question, which talks about if it is happening so fast and it will kill a number of jobs, what happens to the rate of unemployment and how will this impact the economy? So 2 different lines of questioning. One talking about, is it really happening? And the other person asking about what happens to the unemployment as a consequence of the technology. So Sanjeev, any words from your experience in terms of the fact that people are changing skills and roles is given, but are new roles being created as a consequence of this, because of which we will be able to offer them the opportunities in terms of jobs?
Yeah, so let me first take the point which was mentioned, that are they really going away, right? I think that came up as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I just want to say this. We are in the customer support line of work as well, right? I have been in discussions with senior leaders from some of the largest tech companies of the world. The conversation is that, guys, we want to reduce the support which happens over call, chat, etc., by 40 to 50%. And it's happening, right? It's happening. So either you're doing self-service, or the millennials are finding their way through YouTube and Google and other ways of actually fixing things. So it's actually happening. I know, I have personally led transformation where by implementing some of the technologies which integrate, and this is enterprise to enterprise stuff, right? There were 150 people doing the job. We were able to bring it down to 25, right? Always another matter that the business grew significantly with us because the customer really wanted, like what we had done, and they gave us more work because of that. However, coming to the point on jobs, as I had mentioned earlier as well, in my earlier opening comments or somewhere along the way, that different jobs are being created. There'll be more jobs, better jobs being created because of the new technology elements which are actually emerging, whether it's AI, machine learning, and a whole bunch of associated, areas which is going to, come up because of that. And as you can see, there are a number of new job profiles which have happened, right? I mean, I'm sure Ketan, not in our company as much, but I'm sure in your organization and a bunch of others, there are job profiles which never existed before, which are now being, coming up. So there are a number of new jobs coming up, but that's always been the case. Agriculture to industrial happened. People said, where are the jobs going to happen, right? We are seeing this now. Where are the jobs going to go? Yes, the speed of change is rapid, and some of these guys may be trainable. And I think that's the point Ketan was making earlier, but a lot of them will be. So there are a lot more jobs will be created. I think the bigger thing is, I think the agility part of it, the ability to learn, ability to critically think are all becoming actually very, very relevant, right? And now I know those are the jobs which are going to come up. Now, how do we get people get trained in that? How do you, it's not just training, it's actually education, truly education. When the IT boom started, the NIIT, the STGs of the world, we could create technology training, companies, train the folks to be able to meet the demand. But this is a different kind of thinking. Yes, knowing Python and knowing some AI, ML you can do that. But if it's not backed by true critical thinking, etc., you may find that you're not being able to make the progress you need to, because these jobs are truly changing. So the jobs are going to be there. There are going to be more of them. But I think it's going to need a lot more upskilling, educating the workforce to actually to be able to participate in that. And there probably be a lot higher paying jobs as well.
Thanks, Sanjeev. So we've been talking about the change technology is causing in our expectations from leaders, from work and workforce. Maybe spend a few minutes talking about what expectations now leaders have from perhaps the people they lead and the workplace as a consequence of this change. So expectations by leaders, not of leaders. And I'll invite maybe Bhawna, you can start, and then we can get others to comment on that as well.
So I think, as usual, leaders, of course, have a lot of expectations. And, obviously from the team, because, I believe the success of the organization is not driven because of the leader, but because of the people, that they have, right? And that's the reason I think number one change that has clearly happened is that it's no longer about, having one leader who's a really rock star leader, but it's also about, the organization which has many such leaders. So I think that expectation, at least that I have, from a lot of teams and from a lot of senior people and the leaders of today is that, how effectively you are able to groom your own team, right? And how you're able to create more leaders. And if those leaders also have the ability to harness serendipity, because change can happen at any time. And how you're able to harness that, unknown, because any variable, can change practically, overnight, and how you choose to respond under those circumstances and at what pace is really going to define the outcome of that opportunity. And if there are teams who are driven by that, who are very clearly accountable for the risk that they're taking, I think that clearly differentiates. And that's one big expectation, I have especially from all the, across all the departments, that especially in fact when we recruit, Prashant, we don't recruit on what are the skills that you have, right? We also focus on what others, what is it that can't be taught, right? And what is it that can be taught, because natural attributes such as willingness to collaborate are essential. Other skills can be embedded over time. So that's the reason a lot of talent for us also is homegrown, because if you get good people, if they have the right attitude, people that you could mentor, that is something that really differentiates you as an organization. So something that, personally, I have a lot of expectations from my own team for that.
Thanks, Bhawna. Sanjeev, your experience, your expectations as a leader?
So I will quote a line from my first or second boss, right? Way back, but I think it's still relevant today. He used to be the ex-commander of a nuclear submarine. But anyway, he was my tech boss. And he said, Sanjeev, hire people whom you lead, not manage, right? And that has stuck with me forever because, what that means is that the people whom you hire are self-actuated. They will go out and do things. You give them a direction, but they go out and then execute. They figure out what needs to be done, solve issues, solve problems, and figure it out. Now that kind of is the kind of people we need today, because this, to Bhavna's point, the speed of change is so fast that how many people can you truly manage and direct on a day-to-day basis to achieve the objectives? So you really want people who can think critically. I think liberal arts education is very critical, I personally believe. I don't know how do you inculcate that. You know, I've worked with a bunch of these YF kids today. I mean, and you find them, their ability to do things, their ability to lead at a very young age is immense. So I think if you find those kind of people who can think laterally, think critically, have the courage to execute, be able to take risk, and to Bhavna's point, I have very high I've always had it. In fact, it's always had very high expectation for people. Now I know sometimes it goes the wrong way, but I don't think there's any other way. If you don't have high expectations for people, they will not achieve what needs to be done for the organization with the speed with which is required to achieve the objectives which you require. So we got to have folks who are truly self-actuated, who can collaborate, work. I think the other very key part for me is boundaryless behavior, who don't think about themselves, right? Who think of the objective, who think about the company, right? To me, that's a very, very important piece to be able to drive the kind of speed, a kind of change we want to drive with the speed with what we want to do it with. So I think those are some of the elements which are very critical for me to, for the talent who we need to have in the organizations today.
Thanks, Sanjeev. So we're just in the last kind of couple of minutes. So I just invite Ketan, the under 40 CEO, to talk about his expectations as a leader and how they might be different from some of us who are perhaps over the other side of it. So Ketan, any kind of words of wisdom from you in terms of your expectations as a leader, how similar, different maybe from what Bhavna and Sanjeev has described, and then I'll try and wrap after that.
So I think while one side, there are opportunities if I'm good at something for an organization or for a leader. Now, if I have a single role that I want to recruit for, let's say, I can define it threadbare. I can exactly understand what do I need. So I need high cognitive skills. I need, let's say, high critical thinking. I may need certain behavioral traits. I can define that. And thankfully, I have the tools to measure that as well. That's the first thing. The second is I can reach out to the world today. I can exactly zero in regardless of boundaries and find the exact guy who will be the best match, exact at least set of people who will be the best match for a particular job role. So that means, so the outcome of this is that increasingly being average is not good enough. Because if you're average, first, because of digital technology, because of a lot of tools today, you can't hide. It will become evident very quickly. And second is you will probably not get selected even to kind of play the game, because there will be somebody better who is, let's say, at the 2 Sigma or 3 Sigma level who will surface and kind of take that opportunity away. So I think in every role, in every position, in every discussion, we need master craftsmen who are champions of the game. If I can't expect a batsman to be a bowler, and just being a fielder may not be good enough. So I need a fast bowler for a fast bowler position. I need a opening batsman for an opening batsman position, and know the skills for that. And it becomes very evident, even if you kind of get through in 2 matches, it will be very evident. So being a magician in your own sweet art is something that I expect from my team. And you can say that you have high expectation, but it will manifest in this way: that do you have the skills for the job that you're doing, and are you the best in the world for that or not?
Thank you, Ketan. And at that, I'm going to just quickly wrap. So be a master craftsman. Every job today is a technology job. Have the humility, have the agility, the persistence and the passion to go through it. And hopefully you'll be one day sitting on this side of the table giving everybody else advice as opposed to taking advice from some of us. So thank you for joining in. I know there were many questions that we couldn't get to answer, but hopefully you'll get an opportunity to get those answered in the network zone. I'm going to hand it back over to you, Ruby. Thank you again, fellow panelists, for the time and the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Prashant. Thank you so much for your time. And I'd especially want to thank Sanjeev, Ketan, and Bhavna for your time today. A truly very, very interesting session. And in fact, if I had to wrap up in one word that I am taking away personally from this, that's agility. I'll invite all, everybody else who was viewing and attending the session to also share that one word that has stayed with you after the session as well. So when we move to the networking zone, that's where we should catch up for more Q&A, because there are many questions that I can see which are still lined up. And of course, due to paucity of time, we couldn't pick up enough. So let's move on to the networking zone. And before that, I just wanted to quickly share the secret code for this session, which is DigLead. That's hashtag DigLead11, hashtag DIGLEAD 11, that's numeric 11. And I would invite everybody to move on to the networking zone, to visit our partner booths as well, chat with them, of course, strengthen your position at the leaderboard. And the next session would begin in 20 minutes on future of effective learning management systems. So till then, happy learning. And thank you so much. A big round of virtual applause for the panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you, Prashant.